All right, so we have recording started. So today's topic is, before we jump onto that, a quick introduction. So I am Maulik Soni, I'm Cloud Solutions Architect at Microsoft, and I will be presenting Azure Power Lunch today. So the topic for today is Cloud Shell in Azure Virtual Network. So I assume you all are familiar with a Cloud Shell tool which is embedded into Azure portal. And many times it's very useful. It's either you can have a bash shell or the PowerShell. You can run your commands right from within the portal. So you don't have to set up your local environment with different tools. Like Cloud Shell comes built in with Azure CLI, the Kubernetes related commands, and there are a bunch of tools that are pre-installed in a Cloud Shell, which you can use it right away. So this topic today, it talks about putting a Cloud Shell or connecting the Cloud Shell into your Azure Virtual Network, right? And then we can see why that's needed. So I guess the first thing here is that the Cloud Shell session that you create from the Azure portal that runs in Microsoft Network, it does not have access to any resources inside your virtual network that you put in, for example, a virtual machine or Kubernetes cluster with no public access and sort of. So commands that run inside the Cloud Shell by default does not have access to any of your resources which are private to the virtual network. And this feature, which is currently in preview, by the way, it allows you to put your Cloud Shell or connect your Cloud Shell into the virtual network so that from within the Cloud Shell, you are able to manage your resources, which otherwise require you to either create a jump box, VM, or some other solution in order to reach to your resources. I think the picture will provide some more details or the context here. So on the left hand side, you see here is your browser, customer browser, and this is the boundary for that, which connects to Azure portal. And currently, this customer virtual network, this feature allows the Cloud Shell to be able to connect to your virtual network. Basically, you can see it's injected, the Cloud Shell container is injected into the subnet within the virtual network. And by injecting here, you can see that it has now access to all of your virtual machines, the Kubernetes services, and any other resources which otherwise would not be available from outside. Now, the key technology this feature relies on is this Azure Relay to connect back and forth between the public and into the container. And the regular the usage from your standpoint is pretty seamless, that it is the same Cloud Shell. There is nothing else that as a user you need to do. And again, this allows you the ability to connect to the resources. So I think I will jump into the demo, but before I do that, does anyone has any questions? Okay. If not, then we can just jump into the demo. So there are a couple of resources here I want to share. First is the documentation, which provides all the details about Cloud Shell in a private VNet. And there is a sample repo. So let me just pull those in. Okay. All right, so this is a starting point in case if you want to look more details. This is the documentation that's available. And the second resource we have is this Jumpstart template. So what this does is this actually deploys the prerequisites for the virtual network integration, right? Okay. And you can certainly click on deploy to Azure. So that's what we'll be doing. Okay. All right. So to get started, First we need to do is create a resource group. And the service is currently available in only 2 regions, the West US and West Central. So in the preview, we will be using one of that. Okay. All right, so the prerequisite for this is that you will need a virtual network and a subnet that's and the Azure relay along with it. So we will go ahead and start creating those. Because remember, this Cloud Shell will be injected into the virtual network. So that's the starting point here. And then all resources needs to be there. Now, while we are here, just go ahead and create a couple of subnets. So we'll need to store a subnet. Okay. And make sure on the service endpoint, we need to select the storage service. Okay. And then we need one more, is the container subnet. And then here we need to do the container. All right, so then the default option is fine. Okay, go ahead and create it. All right, so with the virtual network in place, it should show up in a minute. Okay, so we got the prerequisite for VNet and subnet. And then let me just go ahead and add the relay. Okay, guess that's it. So while this is deploying, a couple of things I want to point out is the highlight the limitations of this. So first thing is because this connectivity path routes through the network, Cloud Shell in virtual network will be typically slower than a standard Cloud Shell session. The second thing is that again, during the preview, only 2 regions are supported, West US and West Central US. And third thing is that the Azure Relay is not a free service, right? So it's a service that incurs charges. So we consider of those costs with this implementation as well. Okay, with that, so I think we have the prerequisites in place. And one thing I would probably on networking do is this by default does not allow. So I'm gonna add my client IP here. Okay, so the second step here is to go to this side, a quick start template for the Azure Cloud Shell for a VNet integration, and it has a standard ARM template. So I just probably clicked here on deploy to Azure, and that brings up this screen. So this is where we need to put in all the information. To refresh it. Because we just created the resource group, there's an issue there. I might need to restart. Okay. So this is our resource group. The region supported is the West US. The existing virtual network name. So we will get here and grab the virtual network name. Okay. We need the existing storage subnet name. And then the container subnet. And this also requires a storage account, which we did not create it. Okay, so we'll go ahead and create a storage account. West US. Okay, we'll just configure the connectivity later once it's created. Okay, the default options on. All right. Okay, and one thing we will do is make sure we want to add an existing virtual network with the storage account. So okay, save. All right, so now we have everything. This is our storage account name. Okay, and just the default file share. Okay. All right, so I'm clicking off this template here. Okay, so what it's complaining is that the container subnet does not have access to storage on service endpoint. So we need to go back here and need to go back to that subnet. Okay. And then the container subnet. This is we want to select the storage. Okay. All right, go back here. So got the VNet name. Okay, looks everything okay. Okay, so with that, the Cloud Shell config, I'll show you two parts. One is the actual working part. Second is the configuration piece. So in this, with that connected Cloud Shell, it's able to query or reach out to the site which is within that virtual network. And since this is already mounted, we will need to, so to see the experience, the next step, we need to unmount and okay. All right, basically we are now do the reconnect, the bash shell. So in here, you need to click on advanced settings. And there is a new preview feature added here is the VNet isolation settings, right? So here, select the Waste US, the resource group, and the file share name, and the virtual network, and this one. And you can connect to this Cloud Shell. Now this is utilizing a Cloud Shell in a virtual network feature. For some reason, this one did not show up the network profile. I'm not sure what's wrong here, but I think this is preventing me from going forward at this point. So I think today's session will be rather short due to just a small feature that we have released. So I'll open up for any questions.
A question for you. So this uses, you said Azure Relay. That's so it's going to use a WCF relay. Is that correct?
No, it's not using WCF relay. I think it's just using the regular. Yeah. I guess the advantage here is, again, just to highlight, right? A lot of teams previously required to create those jump boxes just in order to reach to those private resources. I think this is another option or an alternative that allows you to quickly connect to those resources and do them. Now, one thing to remember, Cloud Shell does not allow you to install your own packages, right? So there may be certain scenarios where you have to have your jump box because you need external tooling around it. But in other cases where you don't need those external packages or other configuration on the jump box, you just want to simply run your scripts or connect to the resources within virtual network. This would be an easy alternative option.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. With the cost for the hybrid for Relay being, somewhere around $10 a month plus, data transfer. If you use more than that, it's a lot less expensive than, like Azure Bastion, and you can SSH into your machines or enter PS session if you need, to manage them via CLI. So this is a pretty economical option for command line management.
Right, it's all about different choices, right? So there are multiple solutions, including Bastion, and I think this just add one more way to to connect to those resources. Now, this is still in preview feature, so there may be once in a while you might run into some issues, but in general, I think it communicates the idea that those resources are now accessible. Okay. Any more questions?
Maulik, thank you.
Yeah, thanks,
All
Maulik.
right.
This is helpful.
Okay. All right, guys. So I think we'll conclude this session. Again, it was a very short feature demo. So thank you for joining, and we'll see you in the next Powerland session.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thank you, guys. Bye.